Hello, hello. Hi, everybody. Let's see. How's everyone doing tonight? Or morning?
Doing good.
Good. Still got a few more people trickling in, so we'll give it a few minutes.
Peter Bruce Erie. I've just discovered your publication on cooling. Bravo, 3 cheers.
I have a cup of coffee that's going to be ready in about 30 seconds. So I'm going to wait for that and for people to come on in. Jeff, I'm very glad to see you.
Hi.
Charlie, is that phone number you? 240? You're muted.
Good to see everybody. I'm coming to you live from Cayuga Lake in upstate New York. And I'm still getting my windows organized. We have no brand new people, but we have a few who we haven't seen for a while. So let's do a round of introductions. And then because Judy is here, but I know that she can't, well, so both Judy and Patrick won't be here for our fully allotted time. You want to give
So,
us some guidance?
John, I'll correct that. I'll be here, but I'll be turning off my video to eat dinner. Okay, so I'll be here.
Thank you very much.
So
That's
I'll
nice.
just roll. I'm just going to roll with it.
And Patrick, what are your constraints?
Just that my 2-year-old's going to wake up at 5 a.m. and it's our bedtime.
Did you say other than that, you're good?
Yeah, I mean, if the sooner I can get off would be better, just because I'm holding up my wife as well. I'm taking, unfortunately, our only common space here.
Okay.
So.
Then let's do our introductions, but then Patrick and we'll take Patrick's item. And then we will either do then we'll do the decision making because it's late for Judy. And then we'll talk about Bruce and we'll see what else happens. So I'm John Shull. I think I have met all of you at least once. And I will say no more. I will pass the torch to Cole, who is top left on my screen.
Hello, I'm Cole, project coordinator here for the ERA. I'm getting over COVID myself recently, so I'm going to be keeping myself on mute for most of this in case I cough or whatever. I'm getting caught up recently on some emails and some other projects that I've been working on, namely helping John with our mapping project. So following up with people via social media and otherwise, trying to rein them in and get them on board with the ERA. And I will pass it over to Jeff.
Nice to see everybody tonight. John invited me to come to a town hall meeting, so here I am. I appreciate that too. And I do consensus work. I live in New Mexico on a small farm. And we've been getting some rains here in the desert, so it makes things happy, but we're still quite in the deficit. But some rain is better than no rain. Anyway, it's great to see everybody. Thank you. And I'll pass it to Patrick. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm Patrick. I have been in touch with John over the years, over different projects outside of ERA. Touched base with him a little bit after he started this group, and have been helping out a little bit with the mapping project and kind of pushing some other partnerships forward. I'm working also in cooperation with a group called Just One Giant Lab, and we recently hosted a summit, which some of you participated in. And yeah, just here to help out with whatever's happening. I'll pass it on to Adam.
Unmute.
I'm muted. In some opinions, that's a better state for me, but I will persist. And I'm the director of biodiversity for livable climate and one of the co-founders of ERA. And it's getting really busy these days and hectic. Certainly interesting, but yeah, it's a lot. But I'm delighted to see everybody else here dealing with a lot. And I'll pass it to, I don't know, Poyam, have you gone yet?
I have not. Thanks, Adam.
Please do.
I'm Poyam Ryle. I'm living in Northern California in the Sierra Foothills. And I'm new to ERA, and I'm excited to see where I can help out and plug in. And I'll pass it to Judith.
Thank you, Poyam, and hi to all of you. So I'm Judy. I'm a journalist who bumped into all the, well, wrote a book about soil, a book about water, and then a book about the growing ecosystem restoration movement. So I've kind of been in this realm for a while, and I live in Vermont. In terms of the ERA, so I've been, in a lot of conversations because I'm in a lot of networks and have written about and been in touch with many practitioners. And, as I've shared with all of you, in my last book, The Reindeer Chronicles, when I was reporting that, I kind of hit a wall, and it dawned on me that environmental problems are people problems ultimately. And so I wrote about Jeff's work. He just introduced himself. I wrote about a kind of transformation of a community that the problems in the community were very deeply connected to the degradation of the landscape, and how reckoning with that kind of shifted things. So I've been training in that method, and so I've been bringing that into the ERA work, and I'm happy to answer any questions about that. I don't want to repeat more than I need to repeat, but I'm happy to share kind of where that impetus came from, what we've done, and where things are headed. So thank you, and I will pass it to Philip.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you just mention the name of the method that you're talking about?
Ooh, I guess it's, Jeff, correct me, it's through the community consensus. It's Jeff, how do you describe your work or this particular model?
Well, I like the definition I use of consensus, which I think is something that really helps. It's 100% agreement, right thing. It's measured by behavior, not by words. So it's bringing community together, listening to all voices and building a plan that works for everybody. And the plan is actuated by behavior. People actually do it instead of just have a plan on a shelf. And that was a great exercise. So I don't know if that helps, but
Yeah, that answers the question. Thank you very much.
thank you.
Okay,
Judy, you just today gave us an update on the process, and we should have that on the agenda probably after we've talked or in concert with the decision-making discussion.
mhm, mhm. Okay, thank
But
you. I had called upon Philip, so we can proceed.
That's right.
Philip Bogdanoff, board member, Biodiversity Livable Climate, and live just outside of Washington, DC, where I'm very active in city, county, and state activities in Maryland. Also a Quaker for 50 years and been using something very akin to consensus, but not quite, in terms of business process during that period every month. So, and I will pass it to Peter Brucieri.
Kia ora from Aotearoa, that's the Māori name for New Zealand. Jeff, I had to mute before because of the rain. It's winter here and we've had heaps. I guess that'll do by way of introduction. I'll speak more later.
All right then. You should pass the torch to Paula or Charles, who have not been heard from yet.
Yeah, Charles.
Well, Charles is now on mute or inaudible in any case.
How's that? Is that better?
Yes,
Okay. I'm Charlie Shore. I am a retired toxicologist and GIS analyst. I did a number of years working in ecotoxicology. In retirement, I have become increasingly concerned about the confluence of all of these problems that we're facing. Worked somewhat with Bio for Climate in the past, and I'm coming back on board. Hope to help out with the big map project. And I guess Paul is the only one left.
Yep, I think so. Paula, not for the first time.
Not for the, but at least my mic is in place. So, yeah, so I apologize. Had a little difficulty getting in, and I missed hearing what some of the first people were saying. So, I regret that. So I'm Paula Phipps, and my title is Associate Director of Biodiversity for Livable Climate, and I'm kind of a lifelong educator and activist, and have had going through the whole civil rights movement. It was a really big learning experience, and we did a lot of whatever it was called, multicultural sensitivity training around here. Cambridge was the first city to voluntarily desegregate, and I was a part of that push, and it was it was humbling. It was wonderful. But I have been primarily a school director and a teacher of young children, director of an early education center, one that I founded and directed for the Cambridge Center for Chinese Culture. So when I retired, I already could see that that climate change was on us in an exponential and just totally poisonous way. And I had been set on edge by Rachel Carson and it was never far from my mind. So I went to Biofilm Climate's first conference on restoring ecosystems, and it moved me from despair to hope. And that's where I've been since then.
You know, I learned something new every time we do a round of introductions. It's really nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have the agenda document is available to you all. And we have a number of topics on it, but before Paula got here, we agreed that we would let Patrick discuss the possible relationship with World Resources Institute's I-20 by 20 program. And then he'll be able to relieve his wife and spend some time with his son before bedtime.
He's asleep.
All right then.
But he's waking up soon.
He's waking up soon. Okay.
Right. Yeah, and feel free, John, to kind of jump in and steer this. And I know that part of the intention tonight was to get everyone else caught up and give them the chance to weigh in. And in some cases, we may have reached out. I don't know if to this group in particular, but we're looking for some specific factoids about some of the work that the ERA members are doing as a means of kind of introducing ourselves to the World Resources Institute and the Initiative 20 by 20. So this is the chance also, if anyone has questions, feel free to ask some follow-ups as well. But essentially, this organization, this opportunity was referred to me by a colleague of mine. I come from a background of environmental science and conservation and worked for a long time with the Amazon Conservation Association in Peru, and have kind of maintained relationships with some of those people over the years. And one of those groups is a financial partner of the Initiative 20 by 20. That initiative is part of the Bond Challenge, which is a global challenge where different partners are looking at basically are pledging funding for kind of ecological restoration projects kind of worldwide. These are country-led efforts. And the Initiative 20 by 20 is focused specifically on Latin America and the Caribbean. And so we think that there might be some opportunities to solicit funding directly from these financial partners. We have pitched to them projects like the mapping project and other kind of capacity building and infrastructural support projects, kind of leveraging some of the strengths of this community, but with the end of promoting some of the kind of on the ground land restoration kind of efforts that you guys are involved in. We are right now in the process of writing our kind of introductory letter, which is kind of the formal way of requesting membership as a technical partner of this initiative. And once we are either, once we get a reply from that, if we're accepted, that will allow us to basically form these partnerships to advertise some of our projects and funding opportunities directly to those financial partners. And then if we kind of match their investment strategy, then they could direct some funding to us. And Philip, I'll go ahead.
When you say we, who do you mean?
We as in, so the ERA is the one drafting the letter. So they are the partner. There are also some other organizations that are represented that are members of the ERA, but maybe at different levels of engagement. And again, this is there are opportunities, I think, for individual member organizations to also kind of independently solicit, partnerships with I-20 by 20 as well. This is kind of something I think it'll be an evolving relationship as time goes on.
So if it's about the Caribbean or it includes the Caribbean, have you thought about Tom Garreau, he's from Jamaica? You can't, if you're talking Caribbean, you're talking coastal ecosystems. And he's probably from, from the islands to Panama. He's working in there, so.
Great. I don't remember if he was listed, but the letter has been, I think, circulated, and we are interested in including examples of of our activity in those regions specifically. And even, you know, providing some more kind of concrete details about the number of hectares that we're managing and what kind of impacts those projects are claiming as well.
Patrick, if you don't know Tom, he would be a very good person
Yeah.
for you to become acquainted with, and we will be happy to introduce you.
Yeah, great.
He is a top world-class scientist, a biogeophysicist from MIT and Harvard, and he grew up in Jamaica with coral reefs. His father was a coral reef
Mhm.
specialist, and I think his mother was too.
Yes.
And so he says he's had more coral reef dives than anyone in the world.
Oh, wow. Cool.
And he doesn't,
That's a bold claim.
well, it is, but he's not, he doesn't brag. I
They
mean,
do long hours, don't they? The scuba divers.
Well,
but he also has had a lot of connections with indigenous communities. He was adopted into an Australian tribe and has worked all around the world. I could go on and tell you many incidents where somebody had some obscure experience in some obscure place, and Tom would say, "Oh, I know that place, and I know the chief of the tribe," and da 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 da. So,
Very
But-
cool.
but he's also, just to put the other side of it, he's taken incredibly seriously, and he's been at every COP since the first one on
Yeah.
on the inside, saying
Hmm.
what he needed to say, even though they didn't listen to him.
and he's very affable and humble until you start getting him talking about what he knows so much about.
The
He's still
ubiquitous,
affable, but not quite so humble.
the ubiquitous Russ Spear saw the email that we put out on the list, I think just today, and he reached out immediately to Tom Garreau. And Tom said, okay, I've worked in all of these places, et cetera, et cetera. So that connection is already underway.
Great.
Yeah.
And
And he
should-
responds to email. I don't understand how he does it, because I'm sure he gets
That's
more than
very
I
near
do,
and
but
dear
he
to my
does it.
heart.
So Patrick, you should make sure, I think you're on that thread, and I think the
I am.
discussion is in the group.
Yeah.
But yes, I guess I would add to what Patrick has been saying, that apparently World Resources Institute
Mhm.
has got this particular program called the I-20 by 20, which is short for what? 20?
It was 20, I think 20 million hectares by 2020, but of course we're beyond 2020 now. And so they also have a 2050 goal, which I think 50 million hectares, I want to say.
Let's see. They're currently boasting 8.3 million hectares, but they're still at it. And in our meeting with Walter Vergara and his capable partners there, they indicated that they have a lot of money that's available, and they're trying to figure out how to get it connected with projects on the ground. So this is a call for our Latin American and Caribbean partners in particular. Mike Hands responded in the last 24 hours with a preliminary budget, but it's probably an opportunity for us to bring together other existing ERA members and other potential ERA members. Now, I wish to say that in the draft letter, which you have a link to in the chat, and in the conversation, I made it clear that right now they're talking to me as someone who co-founded the ERA, and that the ERA collectively is working on a decision-making process. So right now, we are a bunch of people whose projects may be of interest to WRI. But as I thought about it, I thought that a group like the ERA, exactly like the ERA, could play a really strategic role in bringing together people with a good understanding of the problems, who could also be involved in helping to identify and vet proposals that they are trying to field. So I guess I will take a moment and just screen share my latest diagram, which will be not here.
Well,
So
while you're
here it
doing
is.
that, just a
Yes.
brief note about Mike Hand and Inga Ali, that
Yes.
they were finalists in the Keeling Curve Prize. They didn't win, but they were finalists, which is an accomplishment.
Well, my diagram's not coming up right now, but to make a long story short, at least one scenario to consider is that WRI or the I-20 by 20 projects might avail themselves of several groups, but ours would be an exemplary group that is, here we go, creating, sorry. Okay. The notion is they have funding, they have this initiative, working with one of Patrick's other affiliations, Just One Giant Lab, as well as with Open Impact, Jamaica and Caitlin and others. We can sort of create what I've called an agora, a marketplace where our various members could act as evaluators and grantors, as practitioners of potentially funded projects, as scientists and storytellers, amplifying the work of these projects, and as knowledge sharers, amplifying the work of these projects, that all of those would go on this mapping project, which my current focus right now is to start with little people, but also aim to have all of these various organizations that are doing restoration share data in such a way that any of us, but in particular us, can look at a single map that shows all of the projects going on around the world, because it's going to take projects all around the world to address this problem. And that's where we could also play a role in helping to design standards for interoperability and data sharing among the data. And over the course of the next 2 or 3 years, if we collectively agree that we want to do it, and for those who agree they want to be a part of it, we can assess impacts, we can develop agreements for possible revenue sharing, and we can return to the X Prize in 2030, 2025, potentially to get funding. And meanwhile, whether we get funding or not, to increase popular understanding and to bring more and more people into this virtuous cycle that's meant to amplify the work of all of these groups, bring even more money in and get even more projects going. So we also discussed the possibility that WRI or other groups in I-20 by 20 might join the ERA, and when we have a decision-making process, that the ERA might decide to, if we're welcome, as I suspect we will eventually be sooner or later, join WRI as a participating member ourselves. So if you know groups in Caribbean or Latin America, send them our way. And when I say our, I mean Patrick, who has kindly led the charge on this, but we'll be pulling this information together. And Judith, I see that you're giving us some helpful links already. Thank you. Philip.
I know the letter is getting long, but there's an opportunity here to insert our cooling message, and maybe Peter can help us with that, given that we're mounting, more and more evidence of the key and important essential role of land restoration for affecting the heat balance on the planet.
Great, agreed. Um, Okay. Russ, we've already talked about your linking us with Tom Garreau and how relevant he may be to this WRI initiative. But as we transition topics, maybe you and Zuzka want to say hello and tell us what's new.
Zuzka, go ahead.
I just got in, sorry. Sorry I am late. I have to lots of catching up, so I'm gonna be listening today.
Okay. But you have been traveling, right?
Yes, I was in Slovakia. I just got back. Yes, and we have a horrible drought there.
Well, tell Michal he needs to fix that immediately. What does he think we're paying him for?
Yeah, I have a lot of catching up. There is a couple of rivers which dried out. It's pretty tragic. But he showed me a picture today. There is a new stream which came up where he did the erosion gully repairs, sequence of them. So that's amazing. While the streams are drying up, and several of them did, and new water came out. So that was nice to see.
Great. All right, nice to see you.
Nice to see you all.
Okay, so we've talked about, so Patrick, anything else you want to discuss about the I-20 by 20 initiative?
Yeah, I have two comments, one on topic and one a bit off topic. But yeah, I think that having a list of people who have work in Latin America and the Caribbean, that would be a great starting point. And actually setting up a call where I can meet some of these people and hear more about their projects would be amazing. And then just because it's on the agenda, and this has been kind of occurring to me as I've been watching these email threads, I'm not very familiar with a lot of the work that any of you do, and I would really like to be. And I was wondering if we have any kind of YouTube channel or something where people have short talks, like introductory talks, as we have something like 130 members now, but something where I could kind of put it on my backlog and start working my way through some of these. I'd love to know kind of what everyone's up to.
Are most people on Open Impact?
Most of them are, and
have
that's
we
a
all,
reminder.
have we been marked with some kind of ERA, or do we need to do that ourselves? Is there some way to do an ERA search and then the ERA members?
Yeah, there is. Cole, if I'm already tired of my own voice, if you want to handle this, but if your voice is tired, I can handle it.
No, I can help with that. We actually just had a meeting with Open Impact today. They were having an open house. Getting everybody on with Open Impact is sort of an ongoing project. Basically, when you're brought into the ERA, part of the email follow-up I send out includes a link to registering with Open Impact, and there's a PDF guide that goes with that gives you kind of a step-by-step of how to get affiliated with the ERA, their pages, and what links you have to put in your personal profile description to kind of show up on the website. All that stuff can be a little bit technical, and they're still kind of refining that process. So if you need any help, you can send me an email, and I can either set up a call with you to help walk you through it, or do it through messaging or whatever works best for you. So I'll re-forward that to you after the meeting, and then if you need some help with it, just let me know and I can do that.
But Patrick, it just, as you probably know, if you go to our website and you click on science or storytelling or practice, you will find our members in Open Impact, and that includes links in many cases to their content. The other thing is that the white paper, and this is in today's email thread, the current version of the white paper is, thanks to Cole, up to date on who all of our members are. And there's a good chance that you will also find biographies of almost everyone mentioned somewhere on the Bio for Climate website, which is a huge repository of presentations and bios of people, many of whom we've come to know through Bio for Climate. So it's out there.
Yeah, I'm wondering, is there a curated list of kind of introductory short, just again, trying to, as
No,
kind of a way to introduce myself to the larger body of work rather than kind of jumping into the.
Right, into the haystack.
Exactly.
There is
Patrick?
not a, hello?
Excuse me. Bio for Climate has an introductory playlist,
Perfect.
and
Yeah.
it's got about 7 videos in it. And it covers a lot of ground. It's not necessarily entirely up to date, but it gives you a good picture of the landscape.
Yeah, great. And for those members who don't have something, if the ERA wanted to kind of take it upon themselves to even promote this a bit, have little 5-minute introductory statements from speakers or from different members, that'd be, I think, really helpful for those of us who are trying to get a lay of the land.
I think that's a great idea. Be aware that for all of our members, there is also probably an interview video where they met with, as all of you have done, met with Cole and me and perhaps someone else in the Alliance and talked through their work.
Yeah.
Extracting really
Sure.
juicy 5-minute nuggets is a great project, which
I know a kid who does that as a service, which I thought was super clever. He basically takes these long form, meetings and that sorts of things and pulls little sound bites and creates little vignettes like that, which I think would be great.
Who was that?
He's a guy I went to school with, and I don't know if he's still doing it, but he used to have a web page up, so I might check in with him to see if he's still offering that service.
Okay.
It's probably a lot to fish through at this point, right?
A lot of what?
A lot of material to fish through at this point, all the town hall meetings.
Well, yes, but we also have notes with hyperlinks, which
Yeah, exactly.
It's a doable task. But I will say that Cole has recently declared that he's going to be moving to New York, and he may or not true.
Quincy in south of Boston.
That's what I meant to say. Quincy in south of Boston.
You have the
And-
right direction.
Yeah, sort of. And he may or may not be as available as he was before. So we're working that through. But the point is that project of producing those juicy 5-minute things is a great idea. I don't think we can simply dump it on Cole right now. We might be able to dump it on someone else, especially if we collectively figured out how we were going to pay for these things and decided that this is one thing we want, an example of something we wanted to pay for, which is my segue to our consensus and decision-making processes under development. Did you get to make your on-topic query?
Yeah, my
Or
on
did I-
topic. Yeah, that was just getting a list of
Okay.
people with projects. Yeah, and
Okay,
I'll stay
good.
on to listen to the consensus thing for a few more minutes.
Okay, good. Okay, so Judy, I think you are in a good position to talk about, well, all right, let me frame this a little bit, but then it would be nice if someone else, maybe Judy, moderates the next part of the discussion. My framing is just to remind people that a week or so ago, I discussed, no, 2 weeks ago, we had a town hall meeting and we discussed a possible process for decision-making. In the course of that meeting, several people had several comments on a framework that I put together. I offered at that meeting to put it in writing so that people could evaluate it. I tried to incorporate some of the topics of discussion, but I believe I left some items out of the way I did put it forward. But it received a few positive comments, no negative comments. And as per the process I had outlined, I then created a votable proposition. Just today it went online, but I've been sort of preparing the infrastructure for several days. The link to that is in the agenda, it's in the email, and for that matter, it is right here. And a few people have voted, but only a few. The way, as I'm not still sharing my screen, no, but you can take a look at it. As you probably remember, the notion is that under this proposal, there's a 1-week voting period. People can vote yes, they can vote no, they can ignore it altogether. But it passes if there are 80% positive responses and at least 20% of the ERA members actually participate. And it's a step forward. Philip.
So sorry, I haven't thoroughly read your proposal, but does it distinguish between the many of us that are part of Biodiversity Livable Climate? Do we each have a vote, or does the organization only have one vote?
It's actually by people, and included in the document is a current list derived from the white paper. No, where is it? Cole, you today gave a link to the list of current members. There it is. ERA members, current list here. Philip's pointing to it. And those are what we consider to be the current membership of the ERA.
That does point to the white paper.
It does, and there's a list in the white paper. Now, once we have a way of making decisions, we might well want to decide that there's a difference between organizations or members or et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, my view is that we've gone through a multi-month period of becoming sort of a community that knows and trusts each other and recognizes each other as brethren and sistren, and that we can now begin to sort of work through these rules. And I put forward a way of doing it. But I would be, I think, perfectly happy to have a vigorous discussion and see this voted down in favor of another process. I think it's time for us to have a process, but I put this one forward as an example. And now it's open for discussion and comment. If it seems appropriate towards the end of this discussion, I'm going, well, everyone even now can vote on it by clicking a link towards the bottom of that page. Votes can be changed over the course of the week. But I sort of hope that by the end of today, many of the people on this call will have taken a position, positive, negative, or undecided, and given some comments, because that puts me in a position to make modifications to the proposal, or conceivably to withdraw it, or to leave it as it is and urge people to help us cross threshold in the 1 week period. Okay, that's my background as I understand it. And I see that people are beginning to put comments in the margins. I'm not looking at them yet, but that's what we're here for. So that's great. Judith, do you want to relate this to the parallel process that you have been leading and talk about your concerns about this one?
Yeah, so just to get everybody up to date, Jeff and other people via the Community Consensus Institute helped us do a kind of two sessions. So we were kind of, so the history of this is that many people felt it important to have a mission statement. What is the purpose of the ERA? And, you know, several people volunteered to write a draft. And having been through this process, I felt very strongly that rather than pinning something down, we owe it to ourselves to let it bubble up. Because by pinning something down, we are foreclosing possibilities where we know we have so many people with so much knowledge in different areas. So let's draw on the collective wisdom of the group. So that is what we embarked on. So the first process, and there were a good 30 people there, was a few basic questions. It was addressing the need for to define a purpose or, like articulate a purpose for the ERA. And so we did process, we broke into groups and we recorded all of the responses. So it was, what is the situation as you perceive it and how do you feel about it? What would be, anyway, kind of like, what is the best possible outcome of this process of self-definition? And those responses kind of gave us a sense of what people aspire to via this organization. Okay, so that was part one. Then, so we kind of, because of me and Jeff traveling and, we needed to kind of hold that for a while, but the information was there. People could engage with it and, it can start to stir, spark questions. And then the next process was, given that we have some articulation of what people, because we kept everybody's words, didn't change anybody's words of what they hope for. We put that in a document. What behaviors and beliefs and strategies and actions will create the conditions to realize this vision. So with those two, and about 20 people, maybe a few more, came to that one. So, then this kind of dangling, what are we going to do now? So in consultation with Jeff and Mark and Cindy, I decided, you know what, I've got all this material, let me pull it together. So I did that, and that I've shared with everybody in the, it's gone out a couple of times, one as a Google Doc and one as an attachment. So I'll make sure that everybody has that. But in terms of the decision-making, I just want to read a couple of sections that I think are relevant to that, okay? So this is drawing on what people said. This was not, maybe some of my editorial visions snuck in, but I'll own that, and I can, I'm happy to be challenged. So just one thing, ERA regards nature as its model. Eco-restoration work aligns with ecological principles. We are listening to nature rather than imposing our will upon the landscape. Also, we function as an ecosystem, accepting that we are nature, acknowledging that everyone has a role to play, communicating and supporting each other freely, and made stronger by diversity of experience, knowledge, and skills. Now I'll drop down and how the responses, such as kind of beliefs and behaviors, really articulates a culture and code of conduct. So I'll read that. Responses suggest ERA's culture and code of conduct. This includes the belief that everyone can contribute to healing ecosystems. What each of us does matters, and all voices should be heard. Inclusivity, honoring diversity and the wisdom of communities living in harmony with the earth. An emphasis on empowering youth. Working from a worldview of abundance rather than scarcity. Compassion for those experiencing trauma from ecological degradation and relentless doomism. This ethos is encapsulated from this quote: "If we care for the earth, we have to care for the people who care for the earth." Now, just one more little, really small paragraph about governance specifically. I wrote, "Governance is a concern for many and still a question. This was raised frequently, sometimes noting that we need to know what we are before determining how we govern ourselves. Given the relative clarity about ethics and culture, it seems important to choose a governance approach aligned with the stated values." So I'm just putting that out there that, I wasn't clear whether the governance procedure, decision-making procedure was aligned. I just, to me personally, I didn't connect with it. That's just me. I'm one person. And at the last meeting, there were some people that did raise some questions. So I don't know. I'm in this process. I have never run an or co-led an organization or been part of putting it together, putting a publication together. Yes, but not, this is new to me. So I'm just putting out what I see. And anyway, I'd love to hear comments. So I see Cole has his hand up.
Thanks, Judy. And well, thank you first for sharing that and for all the work that you put into that process, because it's very important, I think, to hear everyone's voices and to make sure that we hold on to that. We don't want to lose sight of that when we're doing this. Part of my experience going through the consensus process, from what I remember hearing other people say and from what I expressed myself, was that we're all in agreement that we are here and we want to work together. But so far, there wasn't a clear sense of action coming from the ERA as an organization. And my perception during that time was that people felt that if we could clearly and efficiently articulate processes and then make decisions based on those propositions, that would kind of help us get the momentum to move forward and start getting some action happening. And that was something that people were very urgent about and really wanted to see. If anybody felt differently, I again want to hear that side. That was my own personal perspective on it. And I think it's important to recognize that with this proposition and with this decision-making process being put forth, it's not meant to be an end-all be-all. This is just meant to be something to get us going forward and something that can be malleable and revised as we go forward. So while I agree with you that we don't want to lose sight of what we all feel and believe, I think it's also important that we do something and have something to start building on top of so that we can start getting on with the work that we want to get on with. That is my 2 cents on the matter.
Yeah, I see Adam had his hand up too. Or maybe his.
I had a conversation with John around a week ago in terms of our mission, and I've stated my end of the conversation before, and that is that one characteristic of ERA should be to do something that the members alone have a hard time doing or can't do, and that is to have a worldwide megaphone, which the X Prize kind of inspired, to project, promote, encourage, demand eco-restoration as a primary process to address biodiversity loss and global warming. In reply, John said to me, what we really need is everybody in the world doing action and inspiring. And our job is to inspire that to happen, to facilitate it, to educate on it. So that was our back and forth. And John's version is clearly much more expansive than mine. So at this point, I'm fine with John's version. A more modest version might be mine. But in response to Cole's point that we really want to get things going on the ground, as an organization, as a collective organization, which is different from the members, each member is doing it already. But somehow taking this group to a place where it would be very difficult for each member to take it because they're all very involved in their own projects. So we're doing this together.
So I just want to respond to that, and I'd love to hear other thoughts. So, what I'm feeling, and this is, kind of where I am, that there's kind of a tension, creative tension between, do we start with a decision-making process and start, or, do we leap into, let's have a decision-making process, let's make some decisions, etc. Or is it about kind of really creating a culture and owning a sense of ownership of what it is that this organization does that isn't out there elsewhere. I mean, look at, WRI does amazing stuff. Evergreening, the Global Evergreening Alliance. I mean, there's like all these entities that, I've reported about it. I mean, they're like spinning all over, but what is this that's, like, how do we own, like a sense of ownership of where we are, and the inspiration comes from that. So that's, I don't know if I'm articulating it that well, questioning what is going, which, like what strategy is going to move us to the place, to the outcomes, towards the outcomes that we all aspire to see. Jeff, I know that you have lots of experience in seeing, oh, Bruce has his hand up, and I'd love to hear from you. And I want to say how lovely it is to see you. I've corresponded with you now for years. Oh no.
Mute
you're
alert.
muted. Peter?
Yeah, sorry. Like in parallel with the way strategy is moved at the moment, it might be good just to put it in place without writing it in tablets of stone, seeing how it goes, and being prepared to have a quick revision should it be necessary.
Thank you, Jeff. I'd love to hear from you, knowing all the experience that you've had seeing groups move forward.
Well, I agree with what everybody's saying in terms of hearing all voices, the passion and direction people want to go. You know what ERA is all about, and the importance. I don't know if I mentioned the importance of all voices. Just as a side note on that if you leave voices out, you lose people. If they're not heard, they disappear or they get sabotaged. Just it's sort of a power dynamic that happens. And then, and also the need for speed. And I often think about, my own life experiences with things, and I'm thinking about the Caldwell tribe when I started with them in the 90s. And I'm a white guy. I don't have any Indian blood in me. And probably the people that American Indians least trust are white people. And so what I went about doing there was to listen as best as I could understand and listen to all the voices that I could find. Anybody that even disagreed with any direction, I wanted to hear and learn from them. And then knowing what I heard from them, what I understood from them, I went forward with actions. And because my job was, I had to get timber sale through the marketplace so they could use the money to pay for jobs. So it wasn't something we could wait, 20 years to make happen. It had to happen now. They needed the jobs today. So, and we had a lot of environmental and cultural conflict about the way forests were being managed. And so, with the understanding as for me and a small team I was working with, we would move forward with plans and things like that. And we would make sure we'd always go back and check make sure we got it right. And which doesn't take much time. And over the 4 years I worked with them, I always got 100% agreement, 100% agreement at the business council on all decisions. And we got things done very quickly. We doubled land treatment. We did it to a higher cultural environmental standard, and we cut, a lot of money out of our budget. We did more for less money, and we're very efficient and effective. So, there's some ingredients with that experience that were really important, and we kind of, Judy and Mark and Cindy and I just sort of talked a little bit about a strategy of how you can move fairly quickly forward with creating that kind of a concept or notion. But you basically, so basically in the situation I was talking about, of course, understanding the importance of speed with getting things done, but also, making sure that we didn't have any voices that were disagreeing with anything that we did. And it's 12 different bands of Indians, 3 different language groups. So it's a very diverse group of people that we're working with, and the whole spectrum of folks. And, the small team that we had, sort of like a steering committee sort of thing, we made decisions for the group based on what we understood, and we made sure that the group agreed with the decisions that we made, that there wasn't any disagreement to what we were doing. And that's what we did. And so we were able to act quickly. A small body did the work. We made sure that we understood and heard what people needed, and then we acted on it. So that's another way. And the thing that was really nice with it is we didn't, if you leave voices out, or if people, if people don't feel heard or aren't included in decision making, or disagree, you'll end up with either they're not participating, not joining, or even getting lawsuits and things that hold things up. So it's just, so I don't know if that helps at all, but I think there's a potential of doing something other than voting, where you have winners and losers, So, and you can do it quick, you can move quickly and whatnot. And being conscious of power sharing and things like that, all those kinds of things that could, there's possibilities. So what we kind of put together was a little framework that Cole, I'm not sure, I think you might have put that out, or you're about ready to put that out, but that's another option that you could consider. And you could, I think you could actually move forward quickly, and which I think is really important. Our Earth is telling us more and more it's really important. And yeah, so that's what I'll just say for now. I don't know if that helps, but I wasn't going to say much tonight, but there I go. All right. Thank you. Judy, I don't know if that helps, but yeah.
Yeah, it does help, because you can speak from experience and I can speak more from instinct because I have not been in this position, or, in this kind of circumstances, but I'm noticing fewer people showing up. So I don't know, it could be a lot of reasons. It could be, it's vacation time in North America, but just kind of wanting to check in, just, yeah. So.
Huska has her hand up.
Thank you, Adam.
Yes.
So I just, I'm sorry, I'm outside, so I'm on the porch. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
So I was 6 weeks in Slovakia now, with my family, taking care, helping with my mom. And just before I was leaving, I noticed a new article in the newspaper which is that newspaper is a conservative newspaper, and I had to laugh because I am mostly, or most of my friends are understand the environmental issues, but the article was about there is drought and we never had a climate change, but we have it this year. Like for them, it was like a big discovery. So I thought, okay, these are climate deniers who notice there is drought and lots of heat waves. And the article was mostly about climate anxiety and saying, you know, everything is CO2 and we are doomed. And at the end, there was little hope. So I thought, let me see what Judith was writing about the consensus so that I can say, oh no, there is lots of hope. There is eco restoration ecology, which offers hope. And I was, I have a lot of catching up with emails, but I thought this is important to see the consensus. But maybe what Cole suggested is to put some kind of like a little mission statement there, saying, and it's evolving, you know, it's still being evolved, so that I can provide a link to the people who wrote the article who never noticed the climate change, but now they notice the drought. Yeah, and I'm sure these are not the only people. This is a conservative newspaper, but I'm sure that this year many people, before they thought the drought is in California, and now it's all over Europe, and that's a big deal for Europeans, according to all the satellite data. So yeah.
Who's next, John?
Paula was next.
I'm sorry, I thought Philip was next.
Philip is next.
Yeah.
Okay, I heard two people talking at once and can distinguish. So I think the subject on the table is this proposal for decision-making. I don't want to stray too far from that, but I did want to respond to something that Judith said earlier, and then her latest comment that noticing fewer people showing up. And well, I'm here because I think collectively we can promote the cooling message more effectively. I think we also need to pay, you know, constant, repeated, and diligent attention to the benefits of being part of this alliance. An alliance is not an organization like a nonprofit with an executive director. It's a voluntary collaboration, and unless it's clear that people are getting benefit, then they are going to stray away or do worse, as Jeff suggests, you know, sabotage. But I think we need to be, you know, proactively focused at every meeting on what's the benefit to, you know, the members who show up, and particularly the ones that aren't showing up, of being in this alliance. What I got out of the consensus, you know, sort of conversations and deeper dive is that one of the key things is this sort of mycelial network we're creating of relationships, you know, and I think knowing each other, knowing what our passions are, what our organizational, you know, expertises are, allows us to feel like we're part of a team, but also to be responsive when a cry grows out, you know, that I'm a little pine seedling that's in need of water. The network can respond and, you know, pitch in. And I think that's one of the benefits that I'm seeing. So it starts with doing, as Jeff said, you know, listening deeply to everyone you can come in contact with, and maybe not speaking as much about what you want to see, but feeling, you know, what the consensus is of hearing all those different voices.
Paula, you would be next.
Yes, thank you. I've had this recurring thought through the meeting, which is, in a way, are we worrying too much about the governance process? And, should we just take a chance on decision making, even though the group is small, that may end up filling out John's form, which I have to go back and look at. I wondered about the figures in terms of the kinds of majorities, but as I recall, I was comfortable with the rest of it. But I was wondering whether it's a matter of trust, maybe, maybe it's safe to say this is a pretty reliable community, and we already know each other pretty well. I don't know Poyam at all, but hello there. And there are some other people who I think we all know are really here in spirit, but this doesn't feel like a vital enough process to them to take this time out. The process is not vital enough. We need to start doing something. And, I'm just thinking, so after deciding on the decision-making process, what is the first decision that we're likely to have to make?
That's a fine question. And we have questions to make of, for example, how do we want to go about supporting what we do? Right now, we haven't had any financial responsibility thanks to Bio for Climate. That welcome grace period is going to end very soon. We've gotten a great deal done with volunteer efforts and one highly competent, reliable staff person named Cole who has been paid. Well, I think that's money well spent, but how are we going to pay for that? Are we going to seek grants? Are we going to raise money from our own members? Are we going to go through some kind of process where we agree to pay someone to work as a fundraising person?
So is this what you're saying is probably the first decision we're going to have to make, what direction to go in order to have the funding to have a staff?
Let me just mention a few others that we could do.
Uh-huh.
We might want to have the people who aren't able to attend the consensus meetings or the consensus statement workshop, which I am 100% in favor of, have the larger group endorse that. If we're going to have a value statement, should it be done by what we can now predict is likely to be the 20 people who show up for the meeting, or should we try to get some process that will also allow people who don't show up in real time to be there? So we could use the thing as an endorsement process that can clearly include even people who don't show up to formulate the consensus statements. We could use it to endorse the consensus statement.
Just that, I sent a note that, to you and Cole can send it out at his convenience, and, just apologizing that for some reason, when I send things out, it doesn't get to the Alliance. It gets to maybe half the people. That's why I rely on passing it along, but that does have very clear next steps. And I'm going to put the file, anyway, I'm having.
Right. Let me just, my hand was up, so now I want to get my chance. I want it to be clear. You've read excerpts for the entirety of that last distillation you did, and my heart sings every time you read it. I think it's a beautiful distillation of shared values, and a consensus workshop to boil that down to an even shorter, even clearer, more essential thing is absolutely something we should do. I don't actually think we need to agree to do that workshop because it's whoever wants to participate gets to participate. And I think it will be valued. I'm inclined to think that rather than the participants saying, okay, this is it, we then have a process for people to ratify those who weren't there. And that's where I'm trying to put a decision-making process in place. I don't see these as alternatives. I see them as parallel processes that can support each other. In fact, the proposal has little to say about values, except that we want something that is inclusive and accountable. It does use the word voting, and it does require votes, but we've talked about how a similar process could not have binary vote choices and so on. But, and by the way, because this process works itself towards consensus, in that people can say, I'm not in favor of this, and I am very grateful to Judy and others who will say that, it creates an opportunity where we can say, suppose we modified it this way, could we get everyone to agree or everyone who has concerns to end up in support of it? Okay, anyway, so point one is values statement as we've got it is a great contribution. A consensus workshop would be great. A decision-making process that includes people who don't show up for those workshops that we do, I think would be a valuable complement. And that's actually that's it. So I will now pass it to Charles.
Yeah, thank you, John. I want to get back to something that Jeff said, I think very eloquently. Some of the studies that I've read, particularly in third world countries, indicate that the one factor that is critical to getting the job done is buy-in by the entire community. And they talk about different ways to convince deniers. But it's the fact that not only are they voting to do it this way, but they are also the participants in the actual physical work of getting it done. It's a community effort. Now, as I said, this is in third world countries where the community interactions are probably a lot tighter than they are in places like the US. But I think that that's an important decision making, this important decision issue right off the bat is how do you get the whole community involved with taking action?
That is the question. I noticed that I'm slipping into the role of moderator as well as advocate, and I'd rather just be advocate or discussant. So Judith, do you want to just recognize who should go next?
Oh, goodness. So we have, I'm looking to see whose hands are up. I don't see any hands up. Oh,
that's
no,
interesting.
now I
Adams.
see hands up. Okay, sorry. I was looking at the wrong screen, as it's so easy to do. I see Adam and Cole. I don't know who was first. So,
Adam was.
okay.
I just want to emphasize what I think is fairly obvious when we think about it, and that everybody in ERA is very, very, very busy. And we're all dealing with all kinds of challenges and constraints and internal and external questions and conflicts and et cetera and so forth. People need a reason to come to these meetings. That they're not at these meetings is not an indication that they're not interested in ERA and what it does. It's an indication that what where their passions are or what they want to see happen has not come up yet. And they don't have the time to attend otherwise. And going back to the beginning, when we were applying for the X Prize under a ridiculous deadline, and several people stepped forward and put intensive effort into into creating our application, that was a really impressive phase in our development. And it happened because we had this focus of the X Prize. I think we need another focus that will inspire people to move. I don't think the decision-making process is a big problem. I think when that focus says, come on, we need you, you should be part of this. There are all kinds of reasons to be part of it, not the least of which is $1 million, but we weren't counting on that. That's when we get the participation. Otherwise, we'll go around and keep talking about this and not get something going. So
Yeah, I appreciate that. I also want to make sure that we get to hear from Peter, who's come to us for the first time.
Indeed, look how time has flown. Thank you.
Yeah, but certainly Cole, has a.
The quick point I just wanted to make too is that I think a lot of people who don't show up here are actually out in the field doing the work, much like Valere Clark and the many others who are part of the ERA. And I think one thing we have to recognize here is that part of activating people to take action is that they no longer need to come to meetings where they talk about taking action because they're out there doing it. So maybe the ones who still show up at these meetings and people who we bring in, what we could focus on doing is finding their niche and what work they could be focusing on. And that can be the function of the ERA, is connecting people with the work so that they don't have to just keep coming to these meetings and talk about what work should be done.
I agree with that. And 2 footnotes. One, not that many people actually worked on the X Prize application. It was a subset who were motivated to do that particular thing. I think present company is also a subset who are motivated to do the, as we will all agree tonight, difficult and painstaking work of sort of trying to clarify who we are and have a process that will ensure us against simply representing those who show up. So attendance of meetings, lack of attendance of meetings doesn't worry me a whole lot. Failure to make progress when we attend these meetings does concern me. Having a way of saying, okay, this is an ERA initiative, not just value statement, but initiative, is something I feel the need for. And I have been fairly careful in trying not to make unilateral decisions on behalf of the ERA. I'm trying to put forward, engage in activities and put forward processes that I think could be useful to the group. But I want a way of having the group say, yeah, this is something we should pursue, or this is not something we should pursue. And the proposal on the table is one example of that. And as I say, I'm quite willing to have people say, nope, this is not the way to go. But I would like them to say whether it is or isn't a way to go. I'm looking at the time.
Need a way to go. We don't need the best way to go.
Yeah.
We need a good way to go.
Yes. Yeah.
Peter, are you willing to, this is a really critical discussion. I know that you haven't been with us that much, but I'd really like to give those 3 hands a chance to be brief before we turn to the also important topic of Peter and his activities. Thank you. So
I'll try to be brief. I just want to highlight again some things that were said. So I would be thrilled to see some kind of consensus model that we could use to make these kind of decisions. I know that I also don't have the time to put that together and set that up. And I would be okay with using a less than perfect voting model to get there. One of the things that came up, and this is a little bit separate, in the last meeting of something that maybe we should vote on or have consensus around is, you know, I don't remember who it was, but she said, hey, I really wanted to get this GoFundMe out there to help the ecosystem restoration camp at the
Banaka Valley refugee camp.
the refugee camp. Thank you.
Yeah.
And the question came up, is that something that the ERA should be doing? We can send things out and they can send things out to people. And we could quickly make a decision about that and either get consensus or vote on it. And so I wanted to throw that out there again too. And then one last thing is, there was a very simple, it's not consensus, but it's different than voting. It's the 5 to 5 model, where when you vote 1 through 5. You know, 1 is I will block this. 2 is I really don't like it. 3 is I don't like it, but I'll take it. 4 is it's pretty good but not perfect, and 5 is I love this, I will champion it. And so that sort of gives an idea of where somebody stands. And so if it's 3 to 5, you know, that kind of passes and goes through. But if anyone has a 1 or 2, we'll wait, let's talk about this kind of thing. So I just wanted to throw that out again with the caveat of I don't have the time to sort of implement a model like this. So I'm happy to participate in consensus or participate in voting.
Point, I just want to say, you mentioned that 2 weeks ago,
I did.
and I didn't weave it into my particular proposal, part because I wasn't sure how.
Yeah,
If you think,
I'm not sure how either. I was only just introduced to it a week before that in a process in another meeting where they were doing it in real time, saying, okay, I think we're going to go ahead with this. How do people feel about this? And in real time, people either put their hand up or put it in the chat, how they felt. And then that gave the facilitator an idea. Can we move ahead, or do we need to stop because someone doesn't like this?
it's interesting. I haven't seen that applied to a sort of asynchronous distributed thing, but if you'd
Right.
like to spend some time thinking that through, I'd be happy to do it. Okay, that was out of turn. Jeff?
Thank you. So first of all, I really like what Adam had to say, that if you don't have something to work on, people start working on each other. And so having a focus is really a valuable thing, like the X Prize. So I think that it really, there's a lot of merit in that idea. Secondly, too, and that's part of why sometimes we don't know how to help people move to consensus, for instance. It's processes and skill sets and that sort of thing. And so the next activity that we suggested about how do you create consensus of a statement, it requires the behaviors and the skills and the process to be able to arrive to that outcome where there's 100% agreement to the statement. And wordsmithing is always something that is really interesting for people, is how do you get to, but this the process of doing that activity is one that you learn how to get people to 100% agreement. So I want to offer that idea with that. And I do like what John was talking about too. It doesn't have to be either or, it can be a concurrent sort of, parallel sorts of tracks of things that people participate in. the last thing I kind of wanted to mention is, so another example, I always work from examples, is just 3 years ago, I was one of the designers of the Healthy Soil Act here in New Mexico. And there was a core of 4 of us that made decisions for the whole state of New Mexico, more or less. What we did is we first of all started with a decision-making framework that allowed us to think about what was in the best interest of the whole state. And mind you that New Mexico has, we're a very divided state politically, and that divided state also has a lot of the ranching farming community, which are, pretty important people in our work, having to be anti-climate, anti-carbon, anti in our state. And so our small team agreed to have our legislation as much as possible pass 100% unanimously to get it done. And we wanted to get it done quickly. We had a 2-month period of a legislative session to act in. And so we used the piece that I've talked about in that approach is basically we wanted no one to disagree with what we were doing. But we started with imagining what would be something that would work for everybody in the state of New Mexico. And so just to fast forward on that, when we got in the legislative process, we had in the House, we just dropped it into the House, which was, again, very divided. But I mean, these are the folks there's a lot of the folks that represented in the House and in our government are anti-regenerative ag, etc. Okay. And we ended up in on the House floor that was the first chamber we went to, with a 48-3 vote in favor of the Soil Health Act. We went into the Senate, again, the same kind of division in the state, and we ended up with 100% agreement to the Healthy Soil Act for New Mexico. And part of what we did in here, this is sort of an interesting, if I can let me see if I can share the screen real quick. Part of what we did is, look, so when 3 years ago, we had 4 soil health champions that are, and this is part of the National Association of Conservation Districts, right there, soil health champions, that sort of thing. It's a network that the conservation districts in the nation have organized. Yeah. And so we had just 4 people in the whole state, and Tennessee was already had quite a few, and other states, South Dakota and whatnot. Anyway, if you look at Tennessee, here's all the soil health champions, and they had about half of these or 2/3 of them already when we started 3 years ago with our 4 people. Number 2 in the state is South Dakota. And this is, South Dakota's numbers. They're the number 2 at the time, and actually now they're number 3. But New Mexico, we're actually now number 1 in the nation in terms of soil health champions. This is how many that we have in the country right now. So that's what's happened in 3 years, from 4 to about 100 soil health champions. So the growth has been great. And this is in a state where, we are very, very polarized, but the law that we created is moving really, really quickly. So we had 4 of us that were at the core of the design work. Then we agreed that we would design this thing that would make it work for everybody in the state as best as we could. So we really listened. And when we were in the going into in between the House and the Senate, the Farm Bureau, which is pretty conservative, pretty much around the world or the US, and they said, we are neutral about this legislation, but if you change 2 things, one is don't use practices, use principles, because let us figure out how to do it. Just tell us what you want done. And so that was one change, and I had already suggested that on our team, but some of our team members thought practices were, it was important to tell people what to do, that they're not really bright. And then secondly, they said, we don't like the word carbon in there. Please take the word carbon out. If you take the word carbon out, we'll be totally in support of this thing. Well, the soil health principles will give us carbon. And nobody, and the thing is like I told my team members who were like really aghast, how can we take out carbon? I said, the thing is that, if we do the principles, we'll get carbon. It's going to happen. Secondly, is that, carbon is an English word. It has nothing to do with the earth, And so, we could call it goulash or whatever word you want to use, we can take carbon out and we still are going to get carbon. So we took the word out, and immediately Farm Bureau was a stronger advocate for the soil health champion than even our team was. It was remarkable, which swayed all kinds of politicians in the state, to go with us. So that's just a story of the possibilities. But we had a small team that did design, but we made sure that it worked with everybody. And we were thinking about a design that worked in the long term. And then we had a small steering committee of about probably 20 people like this that kind of came and went. And they were on calls every couple of weeks or something like that. And that helped us clarify and make sure that we're on track and whatnot. And then we got over to the other thing. So yeah, so that's another example. Thanks.
I'm gonna offer two sentences. One is, that sounds great, and I'll note that it was embedded within a voting process, along with an opportunity to make modifications to reach consensus. Consistent, I think, with what we talked about. That was sentence one. Sentence two is, this conversation can and should continue in the document and in the mailing list. And I hope people really will weigh in that way so that we can have more time to spend on it and vote it up or down. Therefore, I'd like to give the remaining 20 minutes to Peter Bruce-Uri, who consented to join us and is on the agenda. So Adam and Michael, I hope you'll forgive me, and Peter, I hope you'll forgive us for having invited you here and now say, my God, there's only 20 or so minutes left.
I will say something in less than 60 seconds. Jeff, I think the work that you've been doing in these states and with these conflicted communities is amazing. But we are not one of those communities. We do not have those divisions. It's not analogous to what we're doing. So I just asked for that as a consideration.
Well, there's 95% of the landowners that are in conflict with what we're doing. So there is conflict with the group. Yeah. Because you want to get the whole earth.
But not here, not in ERA.
Yeah.
So
we can argue about the fact that we're arguing whether we have conflict within the group could mean either that we don't have conflict in the group or that we do have conflict in the group. Let's have that conversation.
Next time.
Well, in the interim between next time, let's have it where people who
Sure.
didn't show up for this meeting can participate. Okay, Peter.
Yeah, look, I'm just wondering, and I don't see your name, sorry, but the guy from Global Earth Repair, you haven't managed to have a word yet.
If you wish to defer to him, that would be great, because he had his hand up.
Okay,
Yes.
main reason I had my hand up was to say, let's give Peter some time.
Perfect.
And I appreciate that Poyan and Russ commented on the conversation we started today with Rob. And the reason I'm here is that we can talk to other people, that we can announce things to each other, and that ERA's got to serve the members, or people are not going to come to these meetings. I consider this meeting a committee to make these decisions. I empower you. I'll just take whatever you come up with is fine with me. I just want to be able to learn and meet people, learn from and meet people like Peter, etc. here. You're all great. So anyway, so I'm gonna lower my hands lowered. I love to hear from Peter. I already ordered your book.
Oh, thank you. Oh, kia ora, everybody. That's a local Māori greeting here. I really love what I've heard, and I'm really impressed that you've stood ERA up so quickly. And I just John picked up on my message yesterday, and here I am today. So, you know, there's some action orientation going there. So, Cole, despite what you said, this is just not a bunch of the indolent here. And Judith, those sentiments for the mission were really beautiful, I thought. One other comment too, just to put things in context. She's not here now, but she was talking about, you know, the issues in Europe, the heat in Europe, and here in New Zealand we have we've been getting torrential rain in our winter. You know, so I mean, we're bookending this crisis. And another quick final thought is that I just heard that James Lovelock passed away today at 103. Look, I'll just go quickly into this. I've just got a few slides here, and really they're just to provoke some thinking. There's one idea that I've been working on today that has taken some time to form. Yeah, but here we go. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, there's my book, How Plants Cool and Heal the Climate. I had correspondence with a guy that's, you know, it's tempting to use the war metaphor, isn't it? The battle, but actually the healing metaphor, or lately I've been talking about moderating the climate. Now, I did a bit of work over our summer here with a thermal camera, you know, inspired by Michael Kravchuk's Water Paradigm book. You know, he had an image in there. This is just this is from a lens that I put on my camera. I've actually, if I close my second screen, I'll just pull it out and see what happens. Yeah, that's better. Yeah, yeah, just a small infrared lens I put into my cell phone. And this image teaches us such a lot. This is a small reserve at the bottom of my street. That's the top image. The bottom image is the same image, but a different lens perspective. But what you've got there, what you can see in that bottom image, the bush to the right of the image and the turf to the left of the image both have a similar heat signature at about 29 degrees. This is centigrade. This is in a, you know, probably 25 degrees centigrade air temperature day. But the herbicide strip is that diagonal piece that goes up in the bottom image. And you can see there that herbicide strip is as much as 53 degrees. So it's over 20 degrees hotter than the vegetation. And this was common. I often found 20 degrees not to be quite a common difference between vegetation and bare areas. So yeah, there's a lot to learn from this. One of the key findings for me is that pasture can be just as effective for us as forest. Now, the second idea, I've got three ideas. And I haven't expressed this in my book. This has sort of come as a consequence of, I guess, focusing on it. But really, if I was to choose one process that's most important in healing the climate, it's actually photosynthesis. And I've struggled with terminology. You know, we set up this group called direct cooling. I thought direct cooling was a good term, lately I've been using the term transpiration driven cooling, because I think that, this is the magic that photosynthesis does. So there's three processes there. There's the liquid carbon pathway, that Christine Jones talks about, of getting carbon into the most effective way of getting carbon into the soil is through photosynthesis. The second process is the production of hydroxyl ions through plants generously sharing water vapor through that process of transpiration. And that happens because hydroxyl's made from water vapor in the presence of ultraviolet light, plus some, not all volatile organic compounds aren't necessary, but it's a complex process. That accounts for around 90% of the recycling of methane. Now, the third one, of course, is that latent heat transfer that Walter Jenner talks about. And the other interesting thing there is that, that's what plants do to heal the climate. But then there's all those other sort of co-benefits. Basically just providing for our ability to live here on this planet. So yeah, photosynthesis. Now we have this issue in my country that there is a fixation on emissions and emissions reductions, and also farmers are highlighted as a big problem, whereas in reality they have got on their hands a big part of the solution. And so this carbon accounting, which I think is a Western sort of phenomena, which is quite sort of detached from a more nature-based view of the world, is really leading us down a garden path. So we have to find another way. We have to find other ways. And I think what the ERA is doing is exactly where that action needs to be. So this is an image from the book. I grabbed it off the net. I can't remember where, but this shows you this is basically photosynthesis in the globe, and really interesting because the colors seem to be the wrong way around. The deep green bits are minimally photosynthetic. I mean, look at Australia, for example, and the Sahara, and the red bits are highly photosynthetic. So if you look at the US, for example, it's a bit of a mix. Now, you can do this with GIS scanning, with satellite data, and we're thinking our government may introduce levies for methane. We could just as well have a levy in for your photosynthetic capability, which would mean a number of your states would be paying a levy, and some would be in credit. I don't know if you think that might work, but I think that photosynthesis is sort of a proxy for both hydroxyl production and those other two processes that I talked about before. I'd be really interested to see what you think about that. And the last thought is that because this process is so critical, I think the most inspiring work that I've seen is happening in the poorest countries. So, Natalie Topa, who's, she's originally from, I think might have been born in Ukraine. She's a US citizen, but she's working a lot in Africa. And they're doing a lot of these putting these permaculture processes in place, and they're getting fantastic results. The people in India, you'll all know about the Waterman of India. Restoring rivers and raising the the vegetation cover in Rajasthan from 2% to 50%, and reducing temperature by 2 degrees. I mean, it's hard to find documentation to back it up, but it makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah, and that's actually, there's my first attempt. I didn't have the co-benefits in that one, but that's basically it. I wanted to leave plenty of time, just maybe for discussion around that.
So if I can jump in here, Peter, your 1, 2, 3 slide, I've learned in the last 6 months through a couple different sources that liquid carbon pathway is actually capturing less than 1% of the sun's energy. And your number 3, latent energy transfer, is actually between 40 and 70% of the solar insolation. And then if you go to your map where you're showing the GPP, I think it'd be nice if we could find a way to, recognize that there's quite a bit of variation. There's not a one-to-one correlation between using that GPP as a proxy for that 40 to 70% range, which, as I understand it, is highly dependent upon a whole bunch of factors: species, soil, soil moisture, a range of things. But I think it would be very impressive to show that the role of plants is highly, 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 important in that cooling process, and to have a chart that emphasizes that.
Yeah, Walter Jenner says that carbon dioxide accounts for about 4% and that cooling process for about 95%. When I've said that, it's labelled me as a sort of as a climate denier, so I guess we have to add very quickly that we've got to eliminate our use of fossil fuels as quickly as possible on top of that.
Yeah, I'd like to add just on that last piece that you said. It's something that I've become aware of in the last year, is that talking about this kind of solution can get you deplatformed. And I think we should have a strategy around that. We should be able to talk about, well, how are we going to put forward these ideas backed by science in a way that protects us against the algorithm, essentially. So yeah, I just wanted to add that.
Do you have an idea what that strategy could look like?
Sure. Yeah, I think one thing is creating a resource of articles so that we have that all of our members have at hand some kind of searchable resource that we can refer back to scientific studies. I think that's important. And then I think creating a strategy around how we introduce certain ideas and articles on which platform. So I think we could through talking to members that have large social media followings, we probably could figure out which platforms are safe to talk about this stuff on and which platforms aren't. And then that way we could post more in-depth content on the safe platforms, and only on the platforms that are less safe, post links with carefully worded comments about what we're talking about. And be careful, because there's certain words, we found this out from COVID, there's certain words that sort of trigger the algorithm and you get labeled and your views go down. You don't get shown, or you lose subscribers or whatever. Different things happen that make you less visible on the platform. And I think if we can find out from people who have lots of subscribers where they're seeing this happen from their analytics, then we might be able to figure out, okay, Medium, we can post about this, Facebook, we can't, Twitter's okay. Like we could, I don't know. And maybe it changes, who knows? And then we could produce an internal document that's not shared externally, that our members can view internally to be able to access that information.
So there's some good comments on this showing up in the chat. But Poyam, that's an interesting strategy. I can tell you that following through on each of these things, it takes a champion who sort of gets it. And if you would sort of draft a document of that sort, then I promise that I suspect a number of people would pile onto it. But
sure, I could.
That that is part of what it takes in the loose democracy that is us.
Right. I could start something that could get the ball rolling.
That's great. That's great.
And Poyam, I'll help. I mean, I started work with an intern in India on this sort of trying to amass the evidence for the cooling process, but unfortunately her father died and she's kind of taken a sabbatic, I think. I'm not sure if she's going to come back or not, but.
Yeah.
I will say for
I'll
those
connect
who,
with you offline. So thank you.
but if you haven't taken a look at the excerpt of Peter's book, I was very impressed with Peter's book because it does evidence.
I'm sorry, you froze. John, we lost a few words because you froze.
Okay, I said that if you should look at Peter's book because it does cite the available evidence, I think, quite well, but it's also written really lucidly and lightly and to the point. I think it's actually the best sort of popular distillation of the work of Jena and Mikhail Kravchuk and others that I have seen. So it could be that's I think it will be a really valuable contribution to the support platform for the argument that we all, I think, pretty much share. I did also want to mention, though, that what is new to me is the notion that plant hydroxyl might be a significant impact on greenhouse gases because of the effects on methane, and having a sense of the magnitude of that would be very interesting because in the long run, atmospheric carbon is a critical issue. And for those who really care about it, if we can show that plants have a short-term immediate impact on one of the most potent greenhouse gases, that might just give us some leverage with them. Paul?
It's complex.
And you're on mute.
I don't think I am.
No, Bruce is on, Peter is on mute.
Okay.
Paula, go.
So I wanted to mention two things. One, that was Zuzka Mulkurin who left, and she is part of Michael Kravchuk's team, one of his translators, and generally will bring news from Michael if he's not coming. So, or Dusan, who's another member of Michael's team. So I was also going to just mention when you, I think we're referring to Rajendra Singh, the waterman of India. So I don't know whether you've seen those videos, but in 2015, Bio for Climate put on a conference called Restoring Water Cycles to Reverse Global Warming. And that was actually the first time Walter Jena came to this country, and the first time Mikhail came, I guess, to the East Coast. He'd certainly been out west. And Rajendra came, but also other people, including some folks in Nevada. I think that conference is still really relevant. I know that some things have, it's a starter for some people. So I'm only putting it out there just to remind people. Yeah, that's it.
Other comments or questions for Peter? Or Peter, do you want to give us a little bit more?
Well, I went through that pretty quickly because I thought that, it's probably getting late for you guys. Yeah, so, I mean, there's so much more to say, but yeah, I think I'll probably said enough. I'm
Peter,
happy
another topic.
Also, I was just going to say I'm happy for further discussion around this, but actually just to reflect on what's been said about getting the message out there too. I'm in the process of putting together an open letter with a team of a few people here for the New Zealand audience for that very thing, and we're getting quite an enthusiastic response. Judith has been very helpful picking up some errors there in clarity. It's a very complex topic to handle in a short amount of time, but we've got quite a few, got some very good signatories on there. One of the colleagues doing it with me is a professor of soil science at Otago University, and he took it to probably one of our most prominent environmentalists, and he, you know, within a minute he put his name to it, and that's been quite common. So people, there is a resonance for these ideas out there, but it is, I think it is in some ways the job. It's the number one job, because like Judith was saying earlier that, well, maybe to paraphrase you, Judith, that lack of unity, that lack of a common vision of our future here is the big issue. And yeah, I mean, until people stop doing like having special military operations and things like that, we haven't got a hope in hell of you know, getting through this. And I should add that the reason I wrote this book, there's a couple of reasons. That frustrations around the emissions reduction sort of mantra was one, but the other one is because I've got children and I've got grandchildren, and I want them to have a good life on planet Earth. I mean, you know, I'm out of here in a couple of decades maybe or less, so it's not an issue for me, but it's certainly an issue for them.
I think we're all feeling that, Peter, and it's a good note to end on. It's 11 o'clock p.m. For many of us. I'm sorry we weren't able to give you more time, but Peter, I asked Cole to check. You are listed as a member of the ERA. Maybe you took that for granted. So I invited you to show up for today's session, but in fact, I urge you to show up for every session that is of interest to you. And at some point, I would love to talk about the relationship between the conversations that go on in our circle and the conversations that go on in the somewhat overlapping circle of the group that you do. But
well,
that won't.
I've just very quickly, I've been thinking about that, and what I decided to do, I regretted actually making that group so broad. There's quite a few people from New Zealand on it, you know, in my locality. But what I wanted to do especially was just to keep the traffic quite light, so people don't get tired of it, you know. So I think in this way, the two groups are quite complementary, because, you know, like when I put out a request for signatories for the open letter, John Elkington, you know, the guy who came up with the concept of the triple bottom line, Sir Peter Beck, I think his name is. Sir Peter Head in the UK, you know, some real luminaries put their names forward, including Judith, an author. Yeah. So that might work. This is, if you've got a lot of traffic, and that'll be great. I would probably just protect those people a little bit who are very, very busy people.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Vote early, vote often. Feel free to vote no or suggest alternatives. And we'll continue our discussions and arguments online, which is what we're here for.
I had one key question, John, which was when the proposal is modified, does that mean voting starts over?
You can change your votes by clicking on the change your vote link that should be in your mailbox after you have voted. If there's a lot of activity up to the closing point, maybe we actually need a provision for saying that it has to stabilize. People need a chance to change their votes before the gate comes crashing down. In my experience, that's never happened, and going through about 20 exercises of that sort. So I don't have a ready answer for it, but it's worth thinking about. So, and by the way, in the spirit of today's discussion, I think it might be really helpful for many people on this call to say, I'm not voting yes yet, but to do that by choosing other or choosing no, giving your arguments, and that will facilitate the discussion, which we have begun today. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, we'll see you.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.